Hello and welcome to the King Pair podcast. Today was supposed to be the fourth day of the first test between England and South Africa, but sadly it isn't. Well, the sad part is only for anyone who was not rooting for South Africa because they'll be celebrating this win all weekend. To put things into perspective, Janssen, Maharaj, and Nortje scored 117 runs on their own, while the whole English team scored 149 in their second innings. Now, Stuff, I have two questions for you. One, how are you doing? And second, what the hell happened here?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for asking. Um, yeah, England just didn't play well. That's all you can really say. And, there's been a lot of talk about, the buzzwords being used, the Bazballs, the Bayless balls, the Silverwood balls, and whatever. And at the end of the day, this is a problem England have had for a very long time. And no matter who the coach is, the problem is still there. None of the underlying issues have been fixed about the quality of the English batters outside of the usual suspects, Root, Stokes, and sometimes Bairstow. The overall quality of the England batting lineup isn't that good, and some of the heroics from the previous four tests of the summer papered over some of those cracks. But yeah, like this was always coming. It's not the first time it's happened to England. It's the first time it's happened to them under McCullum. But it's if you have the same group of players that played under Silverwood and how disastrously that frequently went, you can't really expect anything to change that much.
Now that gives birth to a question, and that is, did South Africa even face baseball here? I mean, here's the thing. Somebody on the internet yesterday asked a question that what exactly is baseball? Now, obviously, everyone has their own definition or uh, view around baseball, but to put it in rough words, basically based on the four tests that we have seen England win, was that England were basically using the oldness of the ball and flatness of the pitch to play much more aggressive cricket than usual. So, do you think that England even got to that phase where they could do that, or did South Africa basically blow them away even before that phase could arrive?
Yeah, this pitch was a little more lively, I think, than some of the previous pitches that have been doled out over the summer. And the ball as well, I think they've fixed the problem with the Duke's balls that was making them a lot less lively in the last few games. So yeah, like the way England played against New Zealand and against India, it worked in those conditions because it was easier to bat. So England's firepower could more easily come out the same way it would come out in those ODIs or those T20s where they go crazy. And in this game against South Africa, that just wasn't an option because they weren't lasting long enough.
Now, obviously, as you said, that there was a few things that were different during those tests that were actually different here. Like obviously, as you said, the liveliness of the pitch. I mean, even in the Lord's test that was played against New Zealand, the first one actually, where the pitch got easier to bat around the second and the third day, as we saw with New Zealand's and England's second innings in the game. But as you said, there's things that are different, there's things that are still the same, that were just being overlooked during those four tests. So do you think as it went down in those tests, where actually even though England won, we saw similar themes or similar routines of the openers failing? There were a few times when even Bairstow failed, like the Lord's test itself during the New Zealand series. So, do you think this was coming for England? Do you think there was going to be a time when this was going to happen sooner or later?
Yeah, it was always going to happen. The way they played, it was always going to be something that won't come off every match. Even the people in charge of the English team, said as much. They don't expect to win every game like this because you can't win every game like this. Sometimes it comes off, sometimes it doesn't. That's the whole point of playing with a high risk, high reward type of play. And like it didn't come off this game. That happened, and it's not like a failure of the whole project because England would still have to lose. Like I think I saw like 16 or whatever tests in a row for the win-loss ratio to reach what it was under Silverwood. So, like if England play like this, they'll win games, they'll lose games. I think we talked about this last time as well, where will this help England win in India? Will it help them win in Australia? Probably not. Uh, will it help them win some games at home, some games against weaker batting lineups, some games on flatter pitches? Yes, it will. And it's not, it's not radically different from how they sometimes played under Bayless, how they sometimes played under Silverwood. It's and yeah, like things aren't as different as they were, as some may have assumed, as they were under Silverwood and Bayless. And just as long as they can pull out some wins every now and then, that's I don't think they'll complain too much.
True. And as you said, that the law of averages comes into play here. I mean, obviously, they're not going to win every game, but I mean, overall, approach has worked well for them. But even during last week and even this game, I think we have seen a little bit of a theme developing around baseball. And one thing which is not just applicable to this series, but also around the test matches in general in recent times, where in the third innings, especially where the teams were setting targets, hurry to set the targets and ultimately chased. We saw this at this in a game of Pakistan versus England in 2020. A similar thing happened at Gaba in in India versus Australia game. There was Pakistan versus Sri Lanka, where Sri Lanka kind of left too much time for Pakistan, and Pakistan showed enough patience to chase the target. And similarly, even England did it in the Lord's Test, the first test that was against New Zealand, and in the third test as well. Only it was the second test where they did not have that much of a time. So, do you think this whole batting first or batting second thing has been a factor here, especially during this new approach that once the team that comes into bat first is kind of facing an uncertainty, especially given that the English pitches are relatively flat and will not break down during the fourth innings.
Yeah, chasing or if you're defending or chasing in that final innings, we are starting to see it a little more, where just like having that certainty, having the ability to know exactly what you need to do to win. It's very helpful, and we see it a lot. We've seen it a lot in the mid overs cricket over the last 30, 40 years, however long. Where I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure the chasing team does usually have an advantage in limited overs games. It's not just because of win the toss, win the match, or whatever gets brought up. It's not just because of the dew or the old ball. It's a lot of it is just that mindset of being able to know exactly what you need to do to win. And yeah, we're starting to see it more in test matches now. And is it a statistically significant thing that shows a sign of changing times? The new era is all going to be fourth innings chases or busts. I don't know. It's way too early to tell. But for a lot of tests this year, that has been the case where fourth innings chases aren't as daunting as they may have once seemed.
Actually, I was saying that see, obviously, there's a lot of targets being chased in the recent time. So, do you see it as a positive for the red ball game, or is it a negative in your opinion?
I don't think it's really either. Sometimes it'll be fun to watch, sometimes it won't be fun to watch. I don't think it really matters that much. All that matters is that you are getting results and you are getting, different ways of winning matches.
No,
I don't think that we're gonna there's gonna be a bunch of new test fans just because chases in the fourth innings are possible. I don't think that'll really matter. I don't think like the game will be saved or the game will be lost based on how many times a successful chase can happen. But like the fact that I think like the most important thing is just that we are getting results. We're not getting games petering out into draws where where two teams don't even play their second innings. As long as we're getting exciting cricket, it doesn't really matter what form the cricket takes.
Moving on to South Africa and their bowling attack, especially. There's Rabada, Ngidi, Janssen, Maharaj, and Nortje. And I think this was definitely one of the best fast bowling show that we have seen in recent times. So, how do you rate this bowling attack? I mean, we have seen them against India, we have seen them against New Zealand, and now we saw them against England. And obviously, they are going to face off against Australia real soon. So, do you rate them?
It's a very good bowling attack. South Africa are usually very good with their fast bowling lineups, and this is probably the best one they've had since 2014, 2015, when Steyn, Morkel, and Philander were all in their peaks. It's a bunch of young bowlers really coming into their own now. They've had the experience and they've had the time to really grow into the game, and I think they're all ready now to take that last step. I saw somewhere, I think, that this was the fastest bowling attack to play in England in a very long time.
Yes.
And yeah, they're all very quick bowlers, all very skillful bowlers, and there's a nice variety there as well in the type of bowlers they are. And they even have a good spinner now, Maharaj, which South Africa have frequently struggled with. So when they play Australia, I would still probably consider Australia's first choice bowling attack the best in the world, at least in Test cricket. Like among fast bowling attacks, I would probably say Australia is probably still the best in the world. But playing South Africa, that'll be a very interesting series, and I will be very excited to see how that goes. Australia South
Okay.
Africa series are always very good.
Okay. And one last thing to come up with, that is the English opener, Zach Crawley. I mean, he has been given a really long rope here. He has played 26 tests and averages 26 as well. And except that one innings against Pakistan, and I think this one another 100, I don't think he has done that well to warrant his place in the team. So we have seen Stokes say that he'll be getting a really long rope as they see the potential in him. What do you think of this whole scenario of giving someone uh, you know opportunities when their stats do not warrant the same maybe?
So England have said this quite a bit before. I remember Bayliss used to say this a lot, where they would rather give a player one test too many than one test too few. And I do understand that mindset, and I said in the last episode we were talking about Pakistan that I prefer, selection to be like this, where if you pick a player, you show faith in them, you give them a chance to play. But in Crawley's case, this has been going on for a very long time, and he passes the eye test usually, where he looks good until he gets out. But at some point, if he keeps getting out for these low scores, it's just it's not worth it. And he's not it is weird because the scenario he's in right now, where he's a struggling player that looks good, but he doesn't have the numbers to back him up, and he also doesn't have the domestic numbers to back him up because he had a disastrous season at the start of the county championship season. It's not a unique thing. There have been other players that have played for England that went through this. I remember Hasib Hamid went through this after his first tour, where he went to India and he was playing really well until he got injured. Then he comes back to England in the spring and the summer, and he has a disaster season with Lancashire, and he doesn't get to keep his place in the side, and he doesn't come back until a few years later, until just last year. He doesn't come back, and after he finally has another good county championship season. Crawley was really bad for Kent this summer in the championship, and he probably shouldn't have played against New Zealand at all after how he was playing for Kent at the start of the summer. He probably shouldn't have even been playing for Kent with how bad his performances were. But he's still playing for England right now, and at this point, like you can't drop Crawley, tell him to play first class cricket because there's no first class cricket going on right now. You can't pick up a first class pro that just scored 100 in the county championship because there's no county championship cricket going on right now. So England do leave themselves in a bit of an awkward position of, how do you drop Crawley and pick in a new guy when there isn't, like the last championship cricket was a couple months ago. Well, not a couple, I think it was last month, but that was only like one game after a few weeks off before that as well for the Blast. And that's, another problem England have to face with how their domestic structure is organized. But yeah, like Crawley shouldn't have played so many tests this summer, and at this point, like it's almost for his own good that he should be dropped because it just keeps getting brought up and it keeps, it's a tiring point because we all agree that Crawley should be dropped, but he's still playing. It just leaves everyone in an awkward position, and but at the same time, like it's hard to think of how do you replace him because his opening partner Alex Lees also hasn't been doing very good and should also probably have his spot be questioned. But you can't really question Lee's spot when Crawley is taking all the attention and so much more egregious selection error. And I feel like I've seen this after every test this summer where I see a bunch of people go, okay, that has to be it for Crawley. Now he's going to get dropped, and then he still gets picked for the next test. And I've seen it a lot after this test, and I am 100% certain he's going to play the next one still, because England just cannot bring themselves to drop him.
And obviously, as Crawley is the one that we talk about, even talking about the people that he has replaced or that he has been replaced with in recent times. There's been Hasib Hamid, there's Rory Burns, and I think for game mode, I think there was Dom Sivley as well, if I remember correctly. So do you think the whole selection situation has kind of painted England in a corner because seems like they're just running around the bunch of same openers without giving the chances to someone new. As you said, there's no county cricket right now. I mean, there was cricket going on a while ago, and they had the chance to maybe check someone new out. Especially as we talked about it recently that uh, England does not have anything on stake right now. They are not in the contention for the WTC final. They can be more lenient with their choices, but let's face it, they have not been that. So, do you think this is the right way to go when, especially, there's nothing on stake?
Like it's easy to say that England should pick someone else, but who do you pick? Or like at the start of the summer, Ben Compton was making a ton of runs, but his runs fell away afterwards. And I feel like picking a talented player Ben Compton is. I feel like just throwing him into the test side would show that England haven't learned a thing, because that's basically what they did with Crawley. They picked a guy with a poor overall record that just had a good season that year, and they throw him into the test side when he may not have been ready at that point. And I don't think Ben Compton is ready, as you see in the second half of the season. His returns fell away. Yeah, like that's England's best opening candidate right now, the guy who's having the first good season of his career. So yeah, like England rotate between the same few players because those are the same few players that are performing in the role that they're looking for. It's if they want to pick other people, you're picking players like Crawley, like like Crawley, like Ben Compton, like whoever else who may don't have uh, players that aren't performing that well. Um, the player that should probably come back for England is Rory Burns, because I think he's been the one that's done the best in domestic cricket recently, and he's basically persona non grata now after the Ashes, and that whole experience where I think he just fell out with some of the senior players and some of the management. But Burns is the type of player that England would want, they want more domestic players to be like Rory Burns, players that do well in domestic cricket over many years, so you get a decent indicator of their performances over a long time, their strengths and their weaknesses, and after they have a weight of runs over many years domestically, then you can bring them into the side. And there just aren't any openers in England doing that. So how can you really pick new openers if you don't have anyone that'll fill that role? Hasib Hamid made a comeback last summer because it was pretty much because he played for England before, and now he was finally having his first good season since he played for England. And at some point, like, you can't keep doing that, right? Where you just pick a player that's having the first good season in a while to fill this gap in your team, because if you it's just making the same mistakes over and over again. But at the same time, England can't fix this problem because they don't have people who can fix the problem.
Now, before we go, there's 5 days of rest from and then we move to Old Trafford in Manchester. So, what are we expecting from the second test?
I think England will come back fighting. I don't think they're gonna keel over like they would if this were an Ashes series or a series in India. I think they have that positivity around them that'll keep up the fight, and I think they would also make requests of the ground staff to prepare a certain type of pitch that would suit them better than suits South Africa. Because you got to take advantage of that home advantage. Otherwise, what's the point? But yeah, I think South Africa will still come strong because this is their chance to win a series in England. They haven't done that since 2012. And yeah, they haven't won an overseas series in a while, I think. No, actually, they won in the West Indies before the series, but they haven't won in Australia. They haven't played in Australia in a while. They haven't won in India in forever. They haven't won in England since 2012. They haven't won in New Zealand in a while. I think they drew that last series, didn't they? Yeah, like, this is a young South African team. Most of the players haven't won a series in England, which I think none of them have won a series in England before. So yeah, they'll want to win. They'll come to win, but England will also be trying to fight back and take the series to the Oval with the series on the line.
And that ends the episode for today. I'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. See you next time, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.